cheap cabin, sealed destiny. The basement Apache warrior demands marriage. Maya had always felt the city pressing down on her like a heavy, invisible weight. The constant noise, the crowds, the endless rush of people who never seemed to stop, it had become too much. She had spent years chasing deadlines, trying to please clients, and living in a world that never paused. One evening, sitting alone in her tiny apartment, she realized that she could no longer ignore the emptiness gnawing at her. She needed space, a place where she could breathe, think, and create without interruption. That was when she found the listing for the cabin. The advertisement had been simple: cheap mountain cabin for rent. Quiet, secluded, perfect for peace and inspiration. The pictures showed a small wooden house tucked among tall pine trees, sunlight falling softly on its roof, and a narrow dirt path leading up to the front door. It looked perfect, untouched by the chaos of the world. And the price was far lower than anything she had imagined. It felt like fate. Without hesitation, she booked the cabin for a month. When she arrived, the air was crisp and smelled of pine and damp earth. The mountains stretched endlessly around her, their peaks touching clouds that moved lazily across the sky. For the first time in years, Maya felt a sense of calm settle into her chest. The cabin was smaller than she expected, with a slanted roof and wooden walls that creaked slightly when the wind blew. Inside, it was simple, just a living area with a small kitchen, a bedroom with a narrow bed, and a desk by the window. The furniture was old but sturdy, and the walls were lined with shelves that held dusty books and forgotten trinkets. As she unpacked her bags, Maya noticed a small staircase leading down to a basement. The wooden steps looked old, and the door at the bottom had a heavy latch. A shiver ran down her spine as she wondered what might be down there. The previous owner had left a note: "Do not enter the basement." Maya laughed nervously, shaking her head. Of course, she thought, warnings like that were usually meant to scare people away. She told herself it was probably just old storage, maybe some old furniture or boxes filled with forgotten items. Still, there was a strange weight to the words, as if the house itself wanted her to respect that boundary. That night, Maya sat by the window with her notebook open, trying to capture the feeling of the mountains around her. The wind whistled through the trees, making the cabin groan softly, and shadows moved across the walls in ways that made her stomach flutter with both fear and excitement. She was alone, truly alone, and yet she didn't feel lonely. The quiet was soothing, almost like a companion. As she wrote, she heard it, a faint thump from below. At first she froze, thinking it was just her imagination. The cabin was old. Perhaps the wood was settling, or maybe a branch had fallen outside. But then it came again, a deliberate sound, a soft but clear thump followed by a scraping noise. Maya's heart raced. She told herself firmly, "It's nothing, just the house." Still, curiosity pricked at her. What could be down there? Sleep came fitfully that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined shadows moving in the basement, strange shapes that vanished when she blinked. She tried to reason with herself, but a small voice in her mind whispered, "What if it's not empty?" By morning, she felt both anxious and strangely excited. There was a mystery in the cabin, and she couldn't ignore it. The next day, she decided to explore the surroundings before worrying about the basement. She walked through the forest, the ground soft beneath her feet, listening to the rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. The town nearby was small, almost like a forgotten place, with a single main street lined with a few shops and a cafe that smelled of fresh bread and coffee. The townsfolk were friendly but reserved, nodding politely when she passed. A few curious glances followed her, but no one approached. It was clear that visitors were rare, and the cabin was something of a local secret. Returning to the cabin, Maya felt the weight of the basement door again. She told herself she wouldn't go down there, that some mysteries were better left untouched. But as evening approached, the wind picked up, and the shadows in the cabin lengthened. She caught movement from the corner of her eye, a flicker just barely perceptible near the staircase. Her pulse quickened. She took a deep breath, gripping the notebook in her hands like a shield, and approached the stairs cautiously. Peering down into the basement, she could see only darkness. The latch was old and rusted, but it hadn't been locked. She debated whether to open it. Curiosity warred with fear, each emotion pushing her in opposite directions. Finally, she stepped back, shaking her head. "Not yet," she whispered to herself. "I need to understand this place first." Over the following days, Maya settled into a routine. She painted, wrote, and explored the woods. She collected pine cones, watched the sunrise from the porch, and let herself become absorbed in the solitude. Yet every night the basement loomed in her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone, that someone, or something, was watching, waiting for her to notice. Then, one evening, while sitting at the desk sketching the mountains, she heard it again. A thump followed by a scraping sound, different this time, almost deliberate. Her hand froze mid-sketch. The sound came again, rhythmic, like someone moving something heavy across the floor. Heart pounding, she realized that this was no ordinary noise. Something was in the basement. Fear rose in her chest, but it was mixed with a strange sense of inevitability, as if she had been expecting this moment. She thought of the warning from the previous owner and the mysterious feeling that had settled over the cabin the first night. The thought occurred to her, maybe this is why I was drawn here. Maybe this is part of the reason I needed to come. Maya spent the night unable to sleep, listening to the occasional thump and scrape, imagining every possible scenario. She wondered if it was a person, or perhaps an animal that had found its way inside. She considered leaving, but the thought of abandoning the cabin, this sanctuary, felt wrong. There was a story here, she could feel it, waiting to be uncovered. By morning, she made a decision. She would not run from fear. She would face it slowly, carefully. She would learn what the basement held, but only when she was ready. And so, the cabin became a place of both comfort and mystery, a sanctuary intertwined with unease. Maya felt that her life had shifted in a way she could not yet understand. Something was coming, something that would challenge her courage and her understanding of the world. And so, with the sun rising over the mountains and the wind whispering through the trees, Maya prepared herself for whatever lay below. She didn't know it yet, but the basement held more than boxes and dust. It held the first threads of a story that would change her life forever. She was about to meet someone whose presence would demand not just attention, but respect, understanding, and perhaps a choice that could alter the course of her destiny. The cabin, cheap and unassuming, had already begun its work. It had drawn her in, wrapped her in its quiet power, and prepared her for a journey she could never have imagined. And deep in the basement, unseen yet unmistakably present, something waited. The morning after the unsettling night, Maya woke with a lingering tension in her chest. The sun streamed weakly through the small windows, painting golden lines across the wooden floor. Yet, even with the calm light, her mind was restless. She could not stop thinking about the noises from the basement. They were no longer just mysterious sounds. They carried intent, rhythm, and presence, as if someone, or something, was deliberately making them. For a long time she sat by the window, sipping her tea and staring at the mountains. The world outside was tranquil, the wind moving gently through the trees, birds hopping along the branches. It all seemed peaceful, yet the cabin hummed with an unspoken tension. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to take the next step. She tried to convince herself that curiosity was harmless. She had always been cautious but also drawn to the unknown. For months, she had lived in fear of stepping outside her comfort zone, of letting life pass her by while she hesitated. Now the basement presented her with a choice. She could continue to ignore it, pretending it didn't exist, or she could face it, unravel the mystery, and accept whatever lay ahead. With a shaky hand, she grabbed the small flashlight from the drawer and approached the basement door. The wood felt cold under her fingers, and the metal latch was heavier than she expected. She hesitated, staring at the dark opening below. Each step down the staircase seemed to stretch endlessly, the shadows dancing along the walls. The further she descended, the heavier the air became. It smelled of earth and old wood, faintly damp, as if the basement had not been touched for decades. Halfway down, she froze. There it was again, the faint thump followed by the scraping sound. But this time it was different. The noise was deliberate, steady, and closer. Her pulse quickened and fear mingled with curiosity, creating a strange, electric tension in her body. She felt a pull she could not resist, a sense that whatever was below was waiting specifically for her. At the bottom of the stairs, Maya paused. She shone the flashlight into the darkness, its narrow beam cutting through the shadows. The basement was larger than she had imagined, with stone walls and wooden beams that held up the house above. Old furniture leaned against the walls, covered in sheets. Boxes of forgotten items were stacked in corners, their contents hidden. And yet in the far corner she saw movement. A figure stepped forward, tall and calm. His presence was commanding, yet not threatening. He wore simple, practical clothing, and his eyes held a quiet intensity that made Maya's breath catch. He was someone who belonged to this place in a way she could not understand. The sight of him made the room feel smaller, more intimate, yet the air between them was charged with unspoken energy. "Who are you?" Maya asked, her voice barely steady. She had expected to find an animal, perhaps a squatter, or maybe nothing at all. But not this, a person standing silently in the shadows, watching her with calm attention. "My name is Tayden," he said simply. His voice was low and steady, with a rhythm that seemed to echo the heartbeat she hadn't realized had been racing so fast. "I have been here a long time. This land, it is mine. And now you are here." Maya swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "But this cabin is for rent. I didn't know anyone else was here. Tayden lifted a hand, not in threat, but in a gesture that seemed to pause her thoughts. "You did not know," he said. "That is true. But now that you are here, you must understand that this place is not like other places. There are rules, traditions, and responsibilities that cannot be ignored." Maya felt a chill run through her body. The words were strange, yet there was something sincere in his tone. She could sense that he was not trying to scare her unnecessarily, but he expected respect. The basement, which had once been merely a curiosity, now felt alive with history, culture, and unspoken authority. I don't understand," she admitted. "What do you mean by rules and traditions?" Tayden stepped closer, but not too close, maintaining a respectful distance. "This land has been in my family for generations. My ancestors lived here, and certain customs must be honored. When someone comes into this space, they are entering more than just a house. They are entering the history of my people." Maya felt a mixture of fear, curiosity, and awe. She had studied history and different cultures, but experiencing one so directly was overwhelming. She wanted to ask more questions to understand, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she watched him, trying to absorb the seriousness in his eyes. "The basement," Tayden continued, "is a place of respect. Many things are kept here, not just objects, but symbols, reminders, and truths. It is not meant to be entered lightly, and yet here you are." Maya nodded slowly. She could not deny the pull she felt. There was something about Tayden that made her want to listen, to understand, to follow. And yet, a part of her wanted to retreat, to leave the cabin and the mystery behind. But that thought felt hollow. She had come here seeking change, seeking a break from the life she had known. Could she really turn away now? "I didn't mean any disrespect," she said softly. I heard noises last night. I wanted to know what they were." Tayden's expression softened slightly. "You heard the movement of this place, the life it holds. That is natural. Many do not listen. Many do not notice. But you pay attention. That is the first step." There was a pause, and Maya realized she had been holding her breath. Tayden continued, There are responsibilities that come with being here. Not everyone can understand them, and not everyone is willing to follow them. But if you are willing, you will learn. If you are not, you must leave." The weight of his words sank into her. She had imagined the cabin as a quiet retreat, a simple escape. She had not expected it to be a place where tradition, history, and personal responsibility intertwined so directly with her life. Yet there was a strange sense of clarity in Tayden's presence, as if he represented something essential she had been missing in the city, the feeling of being connected to something larger, something meaningful. "I want to understand," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "I don't know what I need to do, but I want to learn." Tayden nodded. "Then you are ready to begin. But understand this, learning here is not simple. It is not just about rules. It is about respect, attention, and the willingness to see the world in ways you have never seen it before." For hours, he spoke, not in lectures but in stories. Stories of his ancestors, of the land, of the traditions that had been passed down for generations. Maya listened intently, feeling a mixture of awe and humility. She realized that this was more than a basement, more than a cabin. It was a bridge between the past and the present, a living testament to the lives and choices of those who had come before. By the time the sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows through the small basement window, Maya felt exhausted and exhilarated. The fear that had gripped her at first was slowly replaced by fascination. She had met someone unlike anyone she had ever known, someone whose life and traditions were deeply intertwined with this land. And she had glimpsed a world that demanded not just observation, but participation, respect, and understanding. That night, as she lay in her small bed upstairs, she thought about Tayden's words. The basement, the cabin, the mountains, they were no longer just a place to escape. They were a place where her choices would matter, where her presence carried meaning beyond her own life. She understood that this was only the beginning, that there were challenges and decisions ahead that she could not yet imagine. But even as fear lingered at the edges of her thoughts, there was a spark of excitement. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt truly alive, aware of every sound, every movement, every breath in a way she never had in the city. The basement, once a symbol of fear, had become a symbol of possibility. And Tayden, with his quiet authority and unwavering presence, was the guide she had never known she needed. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and dreamless. The cabin stood silently around her, the wind whispering through the trees, carrying the promise of discovery, of understanding, of a life reshaped by choices she had not yet imagined. Maya knew that the next day would bring more questions, more challenges, and more moments that would test her courage. But she also knew she was ready to face them. The basement was no longer just a space beneath the cabin. It was the threshold to a world she had never known, a world that demanded respect, attention, and heart. And as she drifted into sleep, she realized that she had already begun the journey, one careful step at a time. The following morning, Maya woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the cabin windows. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the smell of pine and damp earth from the mountains outside. She stretched, feeling the lingering tension from the previous night, the meeting with Tayden and the stories he had shared about the land, the cabin, and his family's traditions. She knew today would be different. The sense of anticipation was heavy, like the calm before a storm, yet she felt a strange certainty that she could not ignore. After a quick breakfast of bread and tea, she walked toward the basement, her notebook in hand. She had spent the night writing down questions and thoughts, trying to prepare herself for whatever would come next. Tayden had said the basement was a place of respect and tradition, a space where past and present met, and Maya felt ready, though nervous, to take the next step. As she descended the wooden stairs, Tayden was already waiting. He stood near the far wall, his posture calm, his eyes watching her closely. The light from the small window in the basement highlighted the lines of his face and the quiet intensity in his gaze. Maya's heart pounded in her chest, and she reminded herself to breathe slowly to steady her nerves. "You are here," he said, his voice calm but firm. "That is the first sign that you are willing to face what must be faced, but it is not enough to simply come here. Understanding is required. Action is required." Maya nodded. "I want to understand," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "I want to learn." Tayden studied her for a moment. "Then you must listen carefully. There are rules that govern this land. There are customs that have been followed for generations. When someone enters this space, they are not simply a visitor. They are part of the story now, whether they wish it or not." Maya swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of awe and fear. She had expected a quiet retreat, maybe a little mystery, but this was something else entirely. This was not a place where one could simply stay unnoticed. It demanded respect and commitment, and the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on her. "There is one tradition," Tayden continued, "that you must understand immediately. It is not meant to frighten you, but it is essential. The land, this cabin, and this basement have been preserved according to a ritual that involves family and legacy. Those who enter must honor the bond or the balance is disturbed." Maya's brow furrowed. "What kind of bond?" she asked, her curiosity mixing with unease. Tayden's eyes held her steadily. "It is a bond of respect. In the past, it was formalized in what outsiders might call marriage. But it is not about love, at least not initially. It is about acknowledging the history, the ancestors, and the land itself. It is a promise that one will honor what has come before and protect what remains." Maya's mind reeled. The word marriage echoed in her thoughts, carrying weight she had not expected. She felt a sudden rush of panic, imagining the life she had left behind in the city, the freedom she had sought, now colliding with a tradition she barely understood. And yet beneath the panic, a strange curiosity persisted. What did it truly mean? What was required of her? I don't know if I can do that," she admitted. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear alone, but from the enormity of the situation. "I came here to find peace to create, not to enter into marriage." Tayden nodded slowly, as if he had anticipated her response. "I do not ask this lightly. I am not forcing you into a life you do not wish to lead. But you must understand, this is about more than just people. It is about balance, respect, and the continuation of what my family has protected for generations. If you are unwilling, then you cannot remain here safely." Maya felt the words settle over her like a heavy cloak. She had come here seeking freedom, but now she faced a choice she could not ignore. Leave the cabin, return to the life she had fled, or stay and face a tradition she barely understood but could not dismiss. Her thoughts swirled like the wind in the trees outside, each possibility tugging at her heart. "I need time," she said finally, her voice quiet. "I need to think." Tayden nodded. "You will have time, but understand this. The time you take is part of the decision. Avoidance is also a choice. Every day you stay, you become part of this story." Maya left the basement, returning to her room to sit by the window. She stared at the mountains, letting the morning sun warm her face. She tried to calm her racing thoughts, but it was difficult. The idea of marriage, even as a symbolic tradition, felt overwhelming. Yet there was something compelling about Tayden, about the way he spoke of respect and balance. She realized that she could not dismiss him, nor could she ignore the pull of the cabin and the land. Over the next few days, Maya explored the area more deeply, hoping that time and distance would help her think clearly. She walked along the mountain trails, observed wildlife, and sketched the landscape in her notebook. Yet no matter where she went, the thought of Tayden and the basement followed her. She tried to imagine what it would mean to enter fully into the tradition he spoke of, to accept the bond and its responsibilities. It was frightening, but also strangely intriguing. One evening, she returned to the cabin to find Tayden sitting on the porch, looking out at the mountains. He did not speak immediately, allowing her presence to settle before continuing. "Have you thought more about what I said?" he asked. Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I have, but I'm not sure I understand it fully. I don't know if I can, if I should." Her words trailed off, swallowed by the weight of the decision. Tayden's gaze remained steady, kind but firm. "You do not need to understand everything at once. Understanding comes slowly, through observation, respect, and action. But you must know this: the choice is yours. No one can make it for you. The land will guide you if you are willing to listen." Maya felt the truth of his words settle into her. She had come here seeking clarity, and now she realized that clarity came with responsibility. She could not remain ignorant, nor could she act without thought. The cabin and the basement demanded more than curiosity. They demanded courage, respect, and a willingness to face difficult truths. Over the next week, Tayden began to show her small tasks and rituals. They were simple, practical actions at first: organizing the basement, tending to small areas of the land, learning about local plants and their uses, but each carried deeper meaning. Every action was a lesson in respect, patience, and observation. Maya felt a sense of connection growing, not just to Tayden, but to the land itself. She began to see the cabin not as a place to escape from the world, but as a living, breathing space with rules, history, and energy that demanded acknowledgement. Yet the weight of the tradition remained. Tayden had made it clear: the symbolic bond of marriage was more than a ritual. It was a responsibility, a promise to honor the past and protect the future. Each day, Maya grappled with the thought: could she commit to something so profound? Could she honor a culture and a legacy that were not her own? The questions were exhausting, but they also sparked a fire within her, a desire to grow, to understand, to rise to the challenge. One afternoon, as they worked in the basement, Tayden spoke again. "Maya, you have done well to listen, to observe, to respect. But now the choice approaches. You must decide whether you are willing to enter the bond or whether you must leave. There is no shame in leaving. Courage is not only in accepting, but in recognizing what one cannot take on." Maya's hands froze over the task she was performing. She had anticipated this conversation, but now that it had arrived, the weight of it was almost unbearable. The decision felt monumental, like standing on the edge of a cliff and looking down at the unknown. Fear threatened to paralyze her, yet beneath it was the pulse of something stronger: determination, curiosity, and the desire to honor not only Tayden, but the land and the tradition he protected. She looked at him, searching for guidance, reassurance, anything to make the decision easier. But Tayden's gaze was steady, unyielding. "The answer must come from you," he said. "No one else can choose for you. And whatever you decide will shape the days ahead in ways you cannot yet imagine." Maya took a deep breath, feeling the cool air in her lungs and the energy of the cabin around her. The noise of the city, the chaos of her former life, seemed distant now, irrelevant compared to the weight of the choice before her. She realized that this was not simply about staying or leaving, marriage or freedom. It was about respect, growth, and understanding the world beyond herself. For the first time, she felt the enormity of what Tayden had been teaching her. It was not just a ritual, not just a tradition. It was a way of seeing life, of acknowledging responsibility, of understanding that every action carried meaning. She realized that whether she chose to stay or leave, she had already begun the journey. She had already stepped into a world that demanded courage, attention, and heart. And so, Maya sat in the basement, surrounded by the quiet hum of the cabin and the faint smell of pine and earth, feeling the weight of destiny pressing gently but firmly upon her. She knew the coming days would test her, challenge her, and shape her in ways she could not yet imagine. But she also knew that she was ready to face them, one step at a time. The days passed slowly for Maya, each one bringing a mix of contemplation and quiet tension. She had spent hours wandering the mountain trails, sketching the cabin, and observing the way the light shifted across the trees. Yet no matter how far she walked or how deeply she focused on her art, her thoughts always returned to the basement, to Tayden, and to the weight of the choice she faced. Each evening she returned to the cabin, and the air seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for her to act. Tayden, calm and patient, maintained his steady presence, never pushing, never rushing, but Maya felt the unspoken urgency. The longer she delayed, the more the tension grew, not only in her own heart but in the quiet rhythm of the cabin itself. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of gold and purple, Maya finally approached the basement. Her notebook clutched to her chest, she took a deep breath and descended the stairs slowly. Each step creaked beneath her feet, echoing softly in the cool, musty air below. Tayden was waiting. His eyes met hers immediately, calm but intense, as if he had known she would come. "You have thought," he said simply. "I can see it in your eyes. You are ready to face the truth of what must be faced." Maya swallowed hard, feeling her throat tighten. I think so," she whispered, "but I'm afraid. I don't know if I can." Tayden stepped closer, not threateningly but with a quiet authority that seemed to fill the room. "Fear is natural," he said. "It is not weakness. It is a guide, a signal that something important is at stake. You must acknowledge it but not let it control you. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting in spite of it." Maya nodded slowly. She had never been one to back away from challenge, yet this felt different. This was not a work project, not a creative problem she could solve with skill alone. This was personal, emotional, and deeply tied to history and culture she barely understood. It demanded more than cleverness. It demanded heart. Tayden motioned for her to sit at the small wooden table in the basement. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from a small window near the ceiling. Dust motes floated in the golden glow, giving the space an almost sacred quality. Maya took a seat, her hands trembling slightly as she rested them on the table. "This is the moment where truth must be faced," Tayden said. "You must decide whether to honor the bond, to accept the responsibilities of this tradition, or to step away. There is no middle ground. The choice is yours, and it will shape not only your life but the life of this land, this cabin, and the history it holds." Maya felt the weight of his words settle into her chest. She had imagined this moment countless times in her mind, but now that it was here, it was heavier, more profound than she had anticipated. She closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep breath, and tried to center herself. "I want to honor it," she said finally. "I want to understand, to respect, to do what is right, but I am scared. I don't know if I am strong enough." Tayden's gaze softened. "Strength is not measured by ease. Strength is measured by persistence, by the willingness to face what is difficult and unknown. You are already stronger than you know, Maya. The fear you feel proves that this matters. It proves that you care." For the first time, Maya allowed herself to look at Tayden not as a figure of authority, but as a person. His eyes held sincerity, patience, and an unspoken invitation to trust. She realized that his insistence on the bond was not about control or ownership. It was about guidance, about teaching her to see the land and its traditions with understanding and respect. The hours passed as they talked, Tayden sharing stories of his ancestors, of the way each generation had honored the cabin, the land, and the traditions that bound them together. Maya listened intently, her mind absorbing each detail, each lesson, feeling the threads of connection weaving around her. She began to see the weight of the past not as a burden, but as a guide, a source of wisdom that could help her navigate her own life. As the conversation deepened, Tayden spoke more personally, explaining the meaning behind the symbolic bond of marriage. "It is not about love in the way most people think," he said. "It is about respect, protection, and acknowledgement. It is a promise to honor the land and the ancestors who preserved it, and in that promise, you find understanding, strength, and connection." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She realized that this tradition, this bond, was not a constraint, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to see beyond herself, to understand a culture and a history that had been hidden from her, to learn patience, respect, and responsibility. Yet the thought of committing to something so profound still frightened her. I want to do it," she whispered. "I want to honor it, but I don't know if I can keep the promise. What if I fail?" Tayden reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. The touch was grounding, comforting, yet it carried a quiet strength. "You will not fail if your heart is true. The promise is not perfection. It is intention, respect, and effort. You will learn as you go, the land will guide you, and I will guide you if you allow me." Maya looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and patience there. She felt a surge of courage, mixed with awe and vulnerability. The fear that had gripped her moments ago began to transform into determination. She realized that the choice before her was not just about a tradition. It was about discovering her own strength, her own capacity to honor, to respect, and to grow. The night fell and the basement grew cooler. Shadows stretched along the walls, giving the room an almost sacred feeling. Maya felt a quiet energy settling around them, the kind of energy that comes from history, care, and reverence. She understood now that the cabin, the basement, and the bond were not threats. They were invitations. Invitations to grow, to understand, and to embrace responsibility. "I will do it," she said finally, her voice steady. "I will honor the bond. I will respect the tradition. And I will try my best to live up to it." Tayden nodded, a faint smile appearing on his face. "Then you are ready," he said. "This is the first step. The days ahead will not be easy, but they will be meaningful. You have already begun the journey." Maya felt a sense of relief, mixed with excitement and awe. She realized that the fear she had felt was not gone. It never would be, but it was no longer paralyzing. She had faced it, acknowledged it, and chosen to move forward anyway. The bond, the tradition, the cabin, and Tayden, they were no longer sources of uncertainty. They were part of her path, guiding her toward understanding and growth. Over the following days, Maya immersed herself in the cabin and its surroundings. She learned the small rituals Tayden had begun teaching her. Cleaning and organizing the basement with care, tending to plants and herbs, observing the wildlife, and recording the stories of the land in her notebook. Each action carried meaning, each gesture was a lesson in patience, respect, and awareness. She began to feel connected, not just to Tayden but to the mountains, the cabin, and the history that surrounded her. Yet the emotional weight of the choice lingered. She found herself thinking often about what it meant to honor the bond fully, what responsibilities it entailed, and how it would shape her future. She realized that she had already grown in ways she could not have imagined. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had become a companion, a reminder of the courage she had discovered within herself. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Tayden spoke softly. "You have changed," he said. "Not just in actions, but in understanding. You see the land, the cabin, and the traditions in a way you could not before. That is the power of choice, of courage, and of attention." Maya nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and humility. She realized that the journey was only beginning, but she was no longer afraid. She had faced the emotional peak of the challenge, the confrontation with her own fear and uncertainty, and had emerged with clarity, respect, and determination. The cabin, once a simple retreat, had become a place of transformation. The basement, once a source of mystery and fear, had become a space of learning and connection. And Tayden, once a figure of authority and tradition, had become a guide, mentor, and partner in understanding the depth of history, responsibility, and respect. As night fell over the mountains, Maya felt a quiet peace settle into her heart. She knew that the days ahead would test her, challenge her, and shape her in ways she could not yet imagine. But she also knew that she was ready. She had faced her fears, embraced the bond, and begun the journey of understanding, connection, and growth. And in the quiet stillness of the cabin, surrounded by shadows, history, and the gentle hum of the land, she understood something essential. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. And in that choice, she had already begun to transform her destiny. The sun rose slowly over the mountains, casting a warm golden light across the cabin and the surrounding forest. Maya stood on the porch, taking in the view, feeling the cool morning breeze on her face. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions: fear, curiosity, doubt, and growth. But now, she felt a sense of quiet clarity she had never known before. The cabin, the basement, and Tayden had changed her life in ways she could not have imagined when she first arrived. She thought back to the day she had arrived, carrying nothing but her bag and a restless heart. The city and its endless chaos felt distant, almost like a dream. She had come seeking solitude, but what she found was much more than that. She had found a world alive with history, tradition, and meaning, a world that demanded respect, patience, and courage. And most unexpectedly, she had found Tayden, whose presence had challenged and guided her every step of the way. Today was different. There was a sense of finality in the air, a feeling that the next step she took would solidify the choices she had been wrestling with. The decision she had faced for so long, the symbolic bond of marriage, the commitment to honor the land and its traditions, was no longer abstract. It was real, tangible, and pressing. Maya knew she could not delay any longer. Descending the stairs to the basement, she felt a mixture of anticipation and calm. The shadows that had once seemed intimidating now felt familiar, even comforting. The room was filled with the quiet hum of history, the wooden beams, the stone walls, the dust motes floating in the sunlight from the small window. Tayden was waiting, as he always was, his calm presence grounding her. "You are ready," he said simply, his eyes meeting hers. There was no pressure in his tone, only acknowledgement. "Not because you are without fear, but because you have faced it. That is what matters." Maya nodded, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She had spent countless hours thinking about this moment, imagining every possible outcome, yet nothing had fully prepared her for the weight of it. "I am ready," she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. Tayden's gaze softened. "Then let us begin." He guided her through the small, meaningful rituals that marked the start of the bond. Each action was deliberate and symbolic, rooted in tradition yet accessible to someone new to the ways of the land. They moved slowly, carefully, as if each step carried the weight of generations. Maya felt a deep connection growing with each gesture, each shared task. The basement, once a place of fear and mystery, had become a sacred space of understanding and transformation. As the rituals progressed, Maya felt her fear giving way to a sense of empowerment. She realized that the bond was not a constraint, but an opportunity, an invitation to honor something greater than herself. She thought about her life in the city, the constant rush, the noise, and the emptiness she had carried with her. Here, in this cabin, she felt grounded, connected, and purposeful. Tayden spoke softly as they worked. "The bond is not about perfection," he said. "It is about intention, respect, and action. You will make mistakes, but that is part of the journey. What matters is the heart with which you act, the sincerity with which you honor the promise." Maya nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle into her. She realized that she had already begun to live the bond in small ways, through her attention to the cabin, her care for the land, and the respect she had shown to Tayden, and the traditions he upheld. Today was simply the formal acknowledgement of what had already begun within her. Hours passed, filled with quiet reflection, conversation, and shared effort. Maya felt herself growing in ways she had never anticipated, learning patience, understanding, and the depth of responsibility. She realized that the cabin was more than a retreat. It was a teacher, and she had become a student willing to learn. Tayden, too, had shown her that guidance does not require control, that true mentorship is rooted in respect and trust. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of pink and orange, they stepped outside together. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and the forest seemed to hold its breath in quiet observation. Maya looked at Tayden, and for the first time she saw him not only as a guide but as a companion on this journey, a person whose presence had helped her see the world differently and herself more clearly. "I never imagined this," she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "I came here looking for solitude, but I found this. I found understanding, respect, and connection." Tayden smiled faintly. "The land chooses who it guides and how. You were ready to listen. That is why you were brought here. It is not chance, but readiness." Maya felt a swell of gratitude. She realized that the cabin, the basement, and the bond had given her something she had been seeking for a long time, a sense of belonging, purpose, and clarity. She had faced her fears, embraced responsibility, and discovered strength she did not know she possessed. As night fell, they lit a small fire in the cabin's fireplace, the flames casting a warm glow across the room. They sat quietly, side by side, listening to the gentle crackle of the wood. Maya reflected on her journey, the fear that had gripped her at first, the tension of the choice she had faced, and the growth that had followed. Each step had been difficult, yet necessary, and she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. Tayden spoke after a long pause. "You have embraced the bond, not just in ceremony but in understanding. That is the true measure of commitment. The land, the traditions, and the ancestors will acknowledge your intention and effort." Maya smiled softly. "I understand now. The bond is not just a tradition or a ritual. It is a way to live, to honor, and to connect. It is about more than me. It is about respect, care, and balance." Tayden nodded, his expression calm but approving. "Exactly. You have learned what many do not, and that is why this path is meaningful. Remember, growth does not end with this ceremony. It continues every day in every choice you make, and in every action you take." Over the following weeks, Maya settled fully into her life at the cabin. She continued to explore the land, tend to the plants, and record her observations in her notebook. She and Tayden worked together, maintaining the cabin and the basement, honoring the traditions they had come to respect. Each day brought new lessons, challenges, and discoveries, and Maya found joy in the rhythm of simple, meaningful work. Her art, too, began to change. She painted the mountains with a deeper understanding of light, shadow, and life. She sketched the cabin with a reverence for its history and purpose. And she wrote in her notebook about her journey, capturing not just images, but the lessons, the emotions, and the growth she had experienced. Maya realized that the choice to honor the bond had transformed her life. She was no longer running from fear or seeking an escape from the world. Instead, she was engaged, present, and fully alive. She understood the weight of responsibility, the importance of respect, and the value of connection, not just with Tayden, but with the land, the cabin, and the traditions that had guided her. One evening, as the stars filled the sky and the mountains were bathed in silver moonlight, Maya and Tayden stood outside, looking at the cabin. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Maya felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she had faced her fears, embraced the bond, and discovered a strength within herself that she had never known before. "This place, it has changed me," she said softly. "Not just because of the cabin or the land, but because of the lessons, the responsibility, and you." Tayden smiled faintly. "It has changed both of us in ways we may not fully understand yet. That is the power of respect, choice, and growth. We are part of something larger than ourselves, and in honoring that, we find our place in the world." Maya nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle deeply within her. She knew that her journey was not over, that life would continue to present challenges, choices, and moments of growth. But she also knew that she was ready, that she had the courage, understanding, and respect to face whatever lay ahead. The cabin, the basement, and the mountains had become more than a sanctuary. They had become a teacher, a guide, and a mirror for her own strength. Tayden had shown her the value of tradition, the power of responsibility, and the depth of connection that comes from honoring the past while living fully in the present. As dawn approached once more, Maya stood on the porch, watching the first light touch the peaks of the mountains. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the land, for Tayden, and for the journey that had brought her here. She had come seeking solitude, but she had found purpose, understanding, and connection. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the mountains, the cabin, and the whispers of history, Maya knew one essential truth. Life is not measured by ease, escape, or comfort. It is measured by courage, respect, and the willingness to face fear, honor responsibility, and embrace growth. The cabin, once cheap and unassuming, had revealed its true nature. It was a place of learning, transformation, and destiny. And Maya, standing in the soft light of dawn, felt that she had finally arrived, not just at the cabin, but at a deeper understanding of herself, her choices, and her place in the world.